Okay folks, this is my first instructional video, and this is involving the growing of peppers. This is my first instructional video, so you'll have to cut me some slack, and I hope you learned something, because when I tried to find some videos on YouTube on this subject, I had a real hard time finding anything useful. So I hope I can help you with that. So what we're going to do first is show you what I've done. You can buy pots, of course, but I think it's cheaper to just use plastic cups. And what I do is I double them up so one of them has a hole and the other one doesn't. What I do is I take a hot screwdriver, I heat up a screwdriver with a blowtorch, and I just melt a hole through a stack of cups like this. And then of course the other cups have no hole, and what I like to do is water them from the bottom. I'll get to that in a minute. Once you have your potting mix, I like to use seed starting mix, professional seed starting mix, because it's sterile. Bacterial infections can cause you problems if you don't use a sterile medium. So just something I picked up. I'm not a fan of any particular brand. I just found this is the first one I found and I grabbed it. And then what I like to do is take this stuff out, put it into a big bowl like this, mix it up with some water to a proper consistency. You don't want it to be wringing wet, just damp. Once you got it all mixed up, get your, get an amount in the cup. These are little cups. I didn't use very much because I'm going to have to transplant them afterwards. So once you get the mix in the cups, you sow your seed, and I sow the seed about 1/8 to 1/4 inch below the surface. And then once you do that, you're going to need something to get them warm, because if the seeds aren't warm, they're not going to germinate. So I've bought this little plastic box for like $5, and then I bought a heat mat, a seedling germination heat mat, and this is the first time I've used a heat mat, and it worked great. I got 2 cups still in there with some seeds that I had to redo. I'm waiting on. I should expect to see them in the next day or two. My pepper seeds took 5 days to germinate, approximately. There might have been a little difference with the different type of seed, but about 5-6 days. Once they germinated, you have to quickly move them to another place, because if they get too tall, it's not good. So once they've germinated, I move them down here to a homemade, all this is a cardboard box. I like to go low tech. And what I've done is I've lined the entire thing with foil, and I've got 2 really cheap fluorescent lights. They're not special plant lights or anything like that. And you try to keep the lights as close as possible to the tops of the peppers, so a couple inches, maybe 1 inch or 2 above the peppers is perfect for this stage of the operation. Okay, so these peppers I have here now, I've got, I don't know, let's see, 8 different varieties I guess I'm growing this year. I grew a lot of hot peppers last year, and this is basically my 3rd year of growing peppers. And so I've only got a couple varieties of the super hot, like habanero style peppers growing this year. I've got giant Marconi, which is sort of like a sweet pepper. It's a large pepper. This one's called Takanatsumi. I don't know anything about it because my neighbor is the one who gave me the seeds. This is Tabasco. I don't have any idea what I'm going to do with it. I don't know what it's going to be useful for, but again, my neighbor had some seeds, so he offered me some. This one back here is so far my favorite hot pepper. It's a Jamaican hot chocolate habanero, and I'll show you that later. I got Ixtapa, which is a type of jalapeno. I guess they get about 4 inches long. I've never grown jalapenos from seed yet, so that'll be interesting. This one here is Buchalokia. That's the hottest pepper in the world. 1 million Scoville units, as opposed to 250,000 Scoville units for a standard habanero. This one's a Fatali. That's a hot pepper. I don't really know too much about it other than that. It looks like a habanero, but I think it's different. And this is a chili pepper, a New Mexican variety called Big Jim. They're supposed to get pretty large. They could be used for stuffing and such. The place I like to get my seeds is a place called Tomato Growers Supply Company, or you can visit them at tomatogrowers.com. I've been satisfied with their products. Their catalog is really vibrant, a lot of good descriptions on the peppers you can get. Just kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. There's a lot of places you can get peppers, but this catalog has been my favorite so far. These are the hot peppers I grew last year, and this was supposed to be Buchalokia, but somebody ripped us off. My neighbor bought these. Turned out to be a regular red habanero. Was kind of disappointed in that because there's not really a lot of flavor with this one. It's just mainly searing heat. This one here was the brown habanero. This whole canister is full of them. And what I like to do is I like to make powder out of them. And I told you Jamaican hot chocolate was my favorite. This is Jamaican hot chocolate powder. That's the last of it. I use it all the time. I use it on everything. It's delicious. It's got a really good flavor, and I got a high tolerance for heat, so it doesn't really bother me. Nobody else seems to be able to take it around here, but that's okay. One thing I discovered about, at least in habaneros, is that some of them can get moldy on the inside and look still perfectly good on the outside. So what I learned to do before drying them is cut them in half, so that way you can examine what they look like on the inside, because you don't want to be grinding up mold spores in your powder. I don't know if it's required or if anybody else ever does that, but it's just something I've decided to do and seems to work pretty good. Okay, so now I told you that I like to water from the bottom. And the reason why I like to water from the bottom is because early on, when the seeds germinate, they can get something called, what is it called? I think it's called damping off. The stems get a bacterial infection and then they just fall over and die. And I've learned that lesson the hard way. And I figure if you water these from the bottom up, you keep the surface somewhat more dry, and yet it still gets the water it needs. So that's where the 2-cup method comes in. And I just let it soak up, takes a minute, whatever, and once I get these watered, I just put them back in the box. So these plants have been growing for 31 days. I sowed the seed on March 14th. Like I said, it took 5 days to germinate, and then it's been growing ever since in that box. Getting pretty good progress. It starts out slow. It's not like a tomato. Tomatoes grow a lot faster than peppers, and which brings me to the point. When you're growing peppers, you want to start them early. I live in Minnesota, and we have a short growing season, and so what I end up doing is start these early, and by the time they're ready to go out there, they're already about a foot, maybe a foot and a couple more inches tall. Really robust looking at that point. Well, anyway, this is the first video. I'll probably make some updates on this as we go along. I'm really satisfied with how this has been going. One thing I didn't mention yet is some of these seeds you got to sow them pretty heavily because they won't all germinate. So if you want to make sure you get a plant in each cup, you know, I sow like 4 or 5, 6 seeds, and then what you end up having to do is just thin them out. You know, like this one here probably used to have 3 plants in there, and I've cut them out. I've chosen the healthiest looking one, and so that's where I am right now. Like I say, I'll make another update as time goes on, but I hope this was informative for you. I wish I would have seen something like this when I was starting this out. And one last thing, after the initial 2 leaves, which are these down here, once those sprout and you get the second set of leaves, I start fertilizing them just a little. What I'll do is I take some of this, I suppose any old standard fertilizer would do, but I only put maybe in this whole thing maybe like 5 drops. You don't want to overdo it. You'll burn the leaves otherwise. And at this stage, you know, that you don't want them to grow too fast either. If you live down south, you know, I'm in Minnesota, like I say. If you live down south, you can start these later, but I just found that it worked really good to start these like in the middle of February for where I live. And they made it entirely through the growing cycle. I got, like I said, I got tons of, in this case, habaneros. And well, anyway, stay tuned for the next video, and you have yourselves a nice day.